Now, if you, yeah, actually, this will be good. I'm glad you did it. I did not go over the problem that's on the quiz yesterday, even if I did record. So this will have the same exact thing you're doing on the quiz. So that's good. So we're recording now. That's the bell work. We said multiplication is just a shortcut to adding the same number over and over again. Therefore, if you have 5 times x, that's really the same thing as just adding x 5 times, which basically means the number in front of the x is just how many x's you have, or the number in front of the variable, how many variables you have. All right, so next page. Now we're going to the book. We'll come back to that. We're going to the book and we're finding the new lesson. So again, this is not on your quiz, but it's the retake. You need to know how to take either a point and be given the slope, solve for the y-intercept, and then put that into the y equals mx plus b format. Or you need to know how to be given 2 points. You got to solve for the slope, then put it in slope intercept form. We did that last quiz. You need to review that. That's a different video. The video for today is 217. Turn to that page. I'm sorry, well, yeah, I'm recording it here, but yeah, the left. So again, this is just another equation of a line. It would be valuable in different situations than the slope intercept one. You would be given typically a point. That point you label x1, y1. And kind of like when we solve for slope, we do x1, y1, x2, y2. And then you'll sometimes be given the slope. Sometimes you'll have to solve for the slope again. The slope formula, I guess I should write it on the board for the video. The slope formula, if you're given 2 points, you have to memorize this, not on your reference sheet that you get for the EOC next year. So if it's not on the reference sheet, I don't give it to you during the quiz. You have to remember that. And we're going to go through and do this today. So, and then once you solve for the slope, if you're given 2 points, then you would do exactly what we're going to do on the first problem. Oh, shoot. Really should give you 2 problems on the quiz, because I should give you one where you have to solve for the slope. That problem. Either I'll give you just one and you have to solve for the slope, which is not the example I have in a minute, or I'll just give you the slope. So I'll think about that. The harder you practice and the more I think that you worked at it, the easier I'll make the quiz. All right, so that's the formula. So write that down. Oh, you don't have to write it down in your pages, but maybe in your notebook. That's the one you got to memorize. I'd write it every time I did a problem because that will help you remember it. That is point slope formula. The reason it's point slope is because they give you a point. And then, like I said, they'll either give you the slope or they'll give you the information you need to figure out the slope. I'll let you write that in a notebook or something real quick. Oh, make sure you write this one because this is not anywhere. Well, it is in the book somewhere, but that's the formula to solve for the slope when you need to solve for the slope. $217, I think I said. And this would be the example you'll use today as well. Whatever this first example we do would be the one when you practice that you'll go back to use. And we're going to do one together, so you can also use that as an example. Looks like we're done. All right. So go ahead, you can turn to the next page. All right, so on the next page, it gives us an example. So top of 218. As of right now, that's the first part of your quiz on Monday. I'm going to give you a point, and I'm going to give you the slope. As opposed to the other option is I could give you 2 points and you'd have to solve for the slope using that y2, that one right there, using that. So if I gave you 2 points, you'd have to solve for this. If I just give it to you, it'll save you a little bit of time. What we're doing is we're just plugging numbers in for this first part. You're just saying, okay, well, if I get a point, I label this x1. That, I didn't mean to say x. You label this y1. You see in the equation where x1 and y1 are, they just plugged them in. They plugged in for the y1, they plugged in 7. They plugged in for the x1, -2. That's it. Tricky part comes in the math. And that's what took people yesterday a while. This one is not too bad over here. There's nothing you have to do. There's no math you can do. Again, y is an unknown variable. I don't know what it is. There's no way to subtract 7 from something I don't know. All I can do is leave it as y subtract 7. This is where you do the distributive property. And you have to do one more thing first, which sometimes you will also be able to do over here, even though it's a variable and a number. Does anybody remember keep, change, flip? Yes. What does that mean for this particular problem? I'm changing a number, so you need to write. I'm not telling you what keep, change, flip means. I'm just telling you what you need to know for this lesson and really anything in algebra. If you subtract a negative, you subtract a negative number, even if it's an unknown number, so an unknown number. So like subtracting negative x. Even though I don't know what x is, it's an unknown, I can still do this. It's not going to come into play today, but it would still be something you have to do. Subtracting a negative, actually, we're going to do this lower. We're going to add a step in. Subtracting a negative changes to addition. I'm going to give you a very super fast version of y. There's a better, more mathy reason, but I'm just going to show you. Imagine a number line. You got a number line, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. -1, -2, -3. Let's just say I start at 2. And at 2, I subtract. Don't like that. Let's start at 1. At 1, don't like that number. Second number this time. At 1, I subtract 2. How do I use a number line to solve that? I normally use money, but this is one time when just to explain why subtracting a negative is actually adding. It's a little easier to do. What do I do using a number line? Some of you have to do. So that's the direction I'll go, but where do I start? On 1, right? So if I'm saying 1 subtract 2, I start on 1, my beginning number. Subtraction means you go left. And I'm subtracting 2, so the answer, -1. Now let's say this is the problem though. Now I subtract -2. Is -2 the same number as 2? Well, it's definitely not, right? So if I'm still subtracting, then I can't go left if I'm subtracting a different number. I can't land in the same spot if it's a different number. So you actually would say this is 1 plus 2, which means you go right. So we would still start on the 1. We go right. So the answer to that is actually 3. Now, the good news is you don't have to even know how to do that if you have both numbers because your calculator, you can use calculator now, you plug it in right, you'll get the correct answer. Here's where you're going to struggle, or here's where people struggled yesterday, I should say. Hopefully nobody struggles. If I give you this, because this is going to pop up a lot today, doesn't matter what the number is. If I give you that, that changes to addition. Have to change that to addition. Or if it's an x subtract some number, which is what we're about to do. So I would have to change that to y plus 4 on the left and then do the right. So keep that in mind. You have to change that before you do the next step if you have subtract a negative. All right, so back to the book page and we'll just do that problem and then you're pretty much gonna work for a little while and then I'll show you the next steps. So again, we have subtract, I don't think I can zoom in anymore. We have subtract a negative. Before you try to do, because we're going to do the distributive property with that -3 halves, we're going to say -3 halves times x, -3 halves times the 2 part. Just go ahead and rewrite it. I would rewrite it at least. -3 halves times x plus 2. Just go ahead and get rid of that. It's an extra step, but it will save you so many mistakes. Trying to use a whole bunch of negative. I mean, you got 3 negatives in one problem. Let's not deal with 3 negatives. Let's just go ahead and get rid of the negative if we can. So change that. And I would still make sure you had that little note. Subtracting a negative changes to adding. Adding a positive, really. Now that we've done that, we can say, okay, now I can do the distributive property. So that's where we take that outside number. You can use calculators, so the calculator will take care of the fraction part for you. And I like doing it this way. I will not take off if you don't, as long as you get the right answer, but a bunch of people are messing it up when they're trying to do it all in the problem. This is like 2 little separate multiplication problems. So I do them separately over here. I say, all right, well, -3 halves times x equals -3 halves times, what is it? 2, positive 2 equals. What's the top one? Answer that. Yeah, just -3. We don't do anything. All we do is we remove the multiplication sign. So it just looks different, but it's really the same exact thing. It's just -3 halves x. So that's our first answer. We'll do the second. Oh, you don't have calculators. That calculator I would not use. You have to do the entry in the reverse order. Which one are you using? Oh, on your phone. Oh, you have your own. Okay. Yes. The geometry calculators, you have to input stuff in a different order. Did you use you have an ABC button on that? Good. I don't mind. I don't know, actually, that. You may have to use, I want you to still do one of these. They will allow you to use multiple display calculator on this. Yep. Yes. All right, I'll come to you next. I may have to find more. Oh no, we got. Aiden, you working today? All right, so go ahead, do that -3 halves times 2. I'll see if you should, I'll just tell you, you should get -3. If you don't, you can ask somebody around you if you think there's somebody that knows, or we'll go over in a minute. But try to do it on your own. I'm not just going to tell you the answer yet. -3 halves x times, I'm sorry, -3 halves times 2, positive 2. 3. Although you haven't learned the second part yet. Oh yeah. There's actually a second and a third part. The second part is super easy. The third part is a little, not even that much. Just we're adding one step for the second part and then one more step for the third part.
I thought we were just practicing to
Your new lesson and then we'll practice all of that.
That's false advertisement. False advertisement.
I was gonna add one more thing. What I'm buying. There's another thing I'm not doing. Like I told you, I just said a minute ago, we're not gonna do that today. That's what I was also. I want you back in your seat. They're already bad enough together, so. Yeah. Like, I don't think that I've heard you stop talking. I hear it just non-stop. Like, I don't think you do stop talking. Again, you do work and you actually have good grades. Both of them. You really? What? Oh, you're missing one of them. Well, you should probably figure that out. All right, what did you get? If you did not get -3, make sure you follow what I'm about to do. So in order to put a fraction into the calculator, a negative fraction is even more, or really a negative number in general. Put the number in first and do not use the subtraction sign. The subtraction sign is not negative. So your order is hit the 3 button, then A, B, C. And sometimes on the calculators, the A is capital. It's still the fraction button. Then we hit the bottom number, the 2. Now we change it to plus or minus, or we hit the plus or minus, which changes it to negative. So you should see -3 with a little backwards L and then a 2. And then once you put that in, that's your fraction. Just say times 2. You should, and then equals, and then you should get -3. So the fraction button takes care of, or the calculator, I should say, takes care of positive and negative rules. It takes care of fraction. It takes care of simplifying fractions, which is another thing that you need to know how to do.
I'll be back, but I'm figuring this out right now.
All right. She's not here. Do you want to keep it or? Kristen's not here. So if you make sure you continually practice, and I am going to start putting fractions in now that you can use calculators. So you're going to have to know how to use it. So anyway, we get -3. Once you get those 2 answers, so we got our 2 little mini problems that we did, and we got 2 answers. You just write those like right next to each other on a line. It's still y subtract 7, nothing changed on that side. And then I just say -3 has x. You can't see this. You can come up and look in a minute. And then I say subtract -3, but let's subtract 3 if you look at it in a problem. That's the final answer for changing it into point slope form. The only math you're really doing is the distributive property, or if you subtract a negative, you have to change that to addition. Now, there's another problem which I'm not going to go through, where you might have, I think it's probably the next exam. Oh, any questions on there? You need to practice it because I know you're not all getting it. There's no way everybody's getting it. We'll see. You're going to have practice. I'm not going to do example 2. It's the same thing. The only difference is they give you 2 points instead of 1, and they don't give you the slope. So they walk you through what you're doing. You're just going to have to figure the slope out first. So once you figure the slope out, which they've done all of that for you, once you know the slope, you can then pick either point, Because both of those points are on the line. That's what they're telling you when they give you those. Both points are on the line, which means you can pick either one. And then you do the same thing we just did here, where you have a point and a slope over here. Once you solve for the slope, you pick either one of those and you have a point and a slope, and you do the same exact thing you just did. You plug it in for the y1, x1, you multiply distributive property, and if you're subtracting a negative, you change that to addition. So I'm not doing that one, but you need to practice that example, and then you could do the check. It's multiple choice, so you should be able to figure out if you got it right or not. We're doing the next piece. Whoop, didn't mean to do that. So let's see, what is the next piece on? What page? Not that page. So that's the part I'm skipping that we're not doing. Parallel and perpendicular. We may or may not come back to it. Wait, whoa. Where's the next part? Wait, hold on. What's the next part? Page 2225. Huh. Where's the next one? Intercept form. Standard form. So example 5 and example 6. What were example 6? 8. Oh, I skipped the one. Sorry. 6. Oh, it's all right there. Okay, sorry. So bottom of 220. So it's actually, I don't know how I skipped. Bottom of 220, example 5. Not really sure how I missed that. So once you get an equation in point slope form, so that's what they've given you. They've given you the equation like we went through and solved and we put it in point slope form, this form right here. You're going to do 2 steps after that on the quiz. You're going to change it into what's called y-intercept form, or I'm sorry, slope-intercept form, which is the y equals mx plus b. They don't do that here, but that's what we're going to do. And I'm not going to do it from this problem. I've got one we're going to do. So we're going to change it into slope-intercept form, which means we're going to get y all by itself. And then we're going to change it after that into what's called standard form. Don't worry, you're going to write it down in a second. But I'm just showing you example 5 will help you with a little bit of that. It'll be the same 2 steps we're about to do to eventually get it to standard form. All right, so write this problem down. That way. Write that problem down. So this would be after we've already done what I just showed you. Once we've already done that, we got it in this is that is, oh, we got 2. So that is point slope form. It's already given to you in that. On the quiz, you have to create that. You do what we just did a second ago. So you're going to want to practice that. Once you have it in that form, changing it to this form is super easy. All we need to do is get y by itself. Now, it won't always be the same math. So sometimes your math will be different. Because remember, the way we solve for a variable, the way we get rid of numbers is opposite math. So if this is +3, the math would be different. Just remember that it's not the exact same steps. Kids yesterday were doing the exact same thing. You still have to think about what it means to solve. If I want y to be all by itself, because that's what slope-intercept form is. Y equals mx plus b. You can write that down, right? I would copy exactly what we're about to do. Either right now, you can write what's up there at the end. Make sure you label which forms of equations are titled what. Point slope form is this one. Y subtract y1 equals m times x subtract x1 So there you go. What do I need to do? If I want y to be by itself, what do I need to do? How do I, if I need to y to be by itself, I got to get rid of that, subtract 3. What do I do? You just add 3. You do the opposite math. That's it. That's the one step you're adding. That's it. The hardest step by far is that initial step of getting it into this format. After that, you're just going to say, okay, well, now there are more difficult problems where there could be something in front of the y. I'm not giving that to you. I'm just telling you, there'll be one step to go from this to this. So I would say, all right, well, if I want to get rid of that, I say plus 3. Oh, shoot. First we got to do the distributive property. I want you to do that. So do the distributive property on that fraction and then the x plus 5. That's where you do the multiplication. You're saying this times this, just like we did in the last problem. Do it as 2 separate little problems out to the side. When you get your 2 answers, you just write those 2 answers right below this on the same line, and that's your new equation. So first, I forgot this. Bless you. If you don't get what I'm not going to go through and do the whole thing, I'm going to just give the final answer so that you have more practice time. I'm already farther than I wanted to. Like taking a long one. I don't know. So like just do the math with, you can't plug that into the calculator. You got to know how to do that. I just did it in the last, look at the last problem. If you wrote it down, we did it. There'll always be an x there because that's the formula. There's always going to be some variable x here. So you can take something times x, which you don't know what to do with that. Should have written it down in the last problem. Or look at your book pages. It's on the example that we did on page, whatever that just was, 218 maybe. I'll give you another like 30 seconds. I'll write it up. If you're not able to get it, better practice that step. That's the easy step. Now here's the only challenge. How am I going to do this? Here's the problem. If you can't do the first step on the quiz Monday, then you can't do the next 2 steps. So I may have to change what I was going to do. But yeah, otherwise you won't be able to get any of it correct. You can't do the first step. So I may have to break it into 3 separate problems after all. I'm just going to go through it. You're going to have plenty of practice. It'll still be the same amount. It's just instead of taking one equation and working all the way through, I'll take one equation, you'll do the first step, then I'll give you another equation that's already correct, and you'll just do one more step, and then I'll give you a correct one and you'll do it. It'll be the same stuff. It is no different. God, you guys don't even know what I'm talking about. Explain what I'm going to do. You don't even know it. You go, oh, no, not that. You don't even know what I'm talking about. You guys, God. Trust me, it's the same thing. It's actually going to be easier for you. All right, so you don't do anything here. Remember, if that was y subtract -3, you would have to change it to y plus 3. Not. So here I say -7/5 times x. What does that give me? See it? What was -7/5 times x? Did you look in your, did you write down what we did a minute ago? Because we did it. Well, that's problem. It's just -7/5 x. You just put them there. We just don't show that we're multiplying. That's all that is. That's all you can do. Nothing. I don't know what x is. I can't multiply an unknown times something. All I can do is just rewrite it like that. So now what is -7/5 times 5? -7. Good. So first we have to do that now. So this was point slope form. This doesn't have a name because we've gotten rid of the parentheses. But in order to get it into this format and to get y all by itself, that's when we now can add 3. But what's my #1 rule of solving equations? If I do something on one side, I have to do it on the other side. And then I just, once I do that math, I'm done. That's slope intercept form. Y is all by itself. what we need, that slope-intercept form. This is still just negative 7/5 x. I didn't do anything to that. And then you just add that. Yeah, on a calculator, you just add negative 7 plus 3. Make sure you include this as a negative sign. Remember, whatever's in front of a number is glued to that number when you go to do anything with it in the problem. So negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. That's the only thing you have to do in the second step. So the second two steps should be easy grades on this quiz. Because the next step is not very difficult either. So you need, let's zoom out so you can see it all. All right, so then there's something called standard form. Standard form. I will go ahead and write what that is. I think it's in your book on one of the pages. I'm not even gonna worry about turning. So again, this is just another equation of a line. It's very handy in certain types of word problems, and we'll probably do one of those next week. I'll show you when it comes in. A, B, and C are what's called integers. Just means they're not fractions or decimals. X and Y are just X and Y, just like we have X and Y in this equation. We have X and Y in this equation. We're going to have X and Y in that equation. What would the X and Y be in any of the equations? What do they represent? X and Y are what in any equation? Well, any equation you're graphing. They're points that are solutions. They would be points on the line if you graph them. They're X and Y are all the possible solutions, just like a line is all the possible solutions, just like a table is possible solutions. Anytime you're thinking X and Y, they're possible solutions to the equation. No matter how complex it is. If you remember that next year, that will also help you a lot. So if I want to get it into this format, what can you again, you got to memorize that new format because I'm not going to tell you the format. I'm going to say put it in standard form. So you got to know what standard form is. So you're going to have to study a little bit for this quiz. Do some almost like vocabulary a little bit. You can't learn this lesson without doing a little bit of memorization. What is the identifying thing? And don't worry about the fact that A, B, and C are letters. Just remember they're going to be numbers. What is true about this equation now? Is there anything you can tell me that's different going from this down to here? I mean, what is different? Is the difference? What about? So Y is no longer alone, right? X is now on the same side as Y. Or we could really specifically say X and Y are not on the right. There's no X on the right. There's no Y on the right. So I need you to write that down. Unless you just think you got this. There are no X's or Y's on the right side of this equation. It'll just be a number on the right side. No variables on the right side. Write that down. Oh, I got it. Well, you're not getting that. It's not for the goals you showed me. And part of it I hear is phone. Imagine that. She says your class is super boring. Because you got a really tiny class. But yeah, she just kind of. She says it's only like 8 or maybe she's getting you confused. I'm just kidding. Regardless, you need to get. I don't remember. If you filled out your new sheet for me, you're supposed to give me a sheet today. I will do that maybe. I know it's Friday, right? So if there are no X's or Y's on the right, how do I go from this Y equals mx plus b to that? What do I need to do? Not flip it. Although sometimes theoretically it could be possible that when I say there are no X's or Y's on the right, it could be possible that you're trying to move the X and Y's to the right and there'll only be a number on the left. I will never give you anything like that. I don't even think the district will do that. So when I say I shouldn't technically say there's no X or Y's on the right, because it depends on really which side you're trying to make inside of the variables, but don't worry about that. So if I say there's no X's or Y's on the right of that, what do I need to do to that equation to move it into this, where there's no X's or Y's on the right? What do I have on the right of that equation in the red, the one that's in the red? Well, I do have -4, but what else do I have on that side? I have X, right? I can't have X on the right. We just said there's no X's or Y's on the right down here. I can't have X on the right. I can't have that. I gotta get rid of that. How do we get rid of something? Doesn't matter if it's a variable. How do we just get rid of the 3 up there? We did the opposite math. So how do we get rid of -7/5 X? What would the opposite math of that be? Add it. When you're trying to completely get rid of something, meaning the whole term, not just the number part, I'm trying to get rid of the X also, it's always add or subtract. I guess I can go back to blue. So if I do it on that side, got to do it on that side. So now we got rid of it. That went to 0, which means all we have left on that side is -4, which is perfect because that's a number. And now all we have is a number on the right. What is now on the left? What do we do with that Y plus 7/5 X? Yeah, we just bring it out. That's it. There's no, you cannot, just like you can't combine an unknown variable with a number, you can't combine an unknown variable with another unknown variable. It just winds up being in this format. The something times X plus the something times Y. So now I will tell you one thing that's wrong about this equation. There you go. That's just 7/5 X plus Y. You would never have a fraction here, because these numbers, just by definition, standard form just means those are all whole, like integers. Wait, was I holding anybody else? I think you're the one that so that's the final step. So like I said, these last 2 steps aren't bad at all. So if I give you I'll give you one problem where you have to solve and get to this. And then instead of you changing that same problem, because if you got this wrong, you wouldn't be able to do the next step. I'll just then give you a second problem where I give you something like this, and you just have to make one change. And then I'll give you that for the third problem in case you do this wrong. I'll just give you one that you can just change for the last one. That way, no matter if you can't do the first step, you can still do the second step. And if you can't do the first 2 steps, you could still do the third step. But remember, you're going to have to memorize these formulas. And then if you memorize the formulas, you should know what you need to do to change it, like what steps. So we added the 3 to change to that. Down here, we got rid of the, in this case, we added. If this would have been positive, we would have subtracted. So that's the part you have to know. You have to understand to do the opposite math. All right, so here's your problem I'm giving you. Do everything. That's what you're probably looking at for the quiz. First step, put it in this format, right? Which will work its way down. I have one solved out up there. You should have one solved out. Once you do that, then put it in. Hey, look who showed up. Then you put it in then you put it in slope intercept form. Actually, I'll just write them here. So first, if you don't know what these are, then you need to look it up. Point slope, then slope intercept. Actually, I'll probably write them. I mean, I just had them on the page before, but and then standard form. That's your quiz. Just be different numbers. And again, you guys have been pretty attentive, so I'm not going to make it any harder. I'm not going to make one where you have to solve for the slope first. That'll be it. I'll give you a point. I'll give you a slope. Then you have to put it into first this, Then you have to know how to take that and change it to that. Oh, I'll write the equations. I'll probably be able to zoom in a little bit after I write this part. So if you can't see it, don't worry yet. What? I wasn't even near that. Holy cow. Boy. Whoops. Whoops. There. Pull. Yeah, but then what did I say?
But that, second round.
I'm not really supposed to do that, so I don't want to advertise it. It's from a safety perspective. Somebody can just come into my room without being locked. That's no bueno. Again, every teacher, some teachers would leave their door wide open, but. Hold on just a second. All right, there is about as easy as I can make it on you. That's your process. Those are the formulas you need to memorize. You need to be able to go from a point, x1, y1, and a slope into that. Do the distributive property. If it's a negative, I'm sorry, if you're subtracting a negative, change it to addition. Then once you get that, you need to be able to change it into slope intercept. And once you do that, you need to be able to change it into standard form.
Oh.
Yes. Remember I didn't take your phone.
I'm on.
I
swear to God, I'll
didn't think you had one either. You got a phone.
Bitch, it's just all. It's always gonna be trouble in getting themselves.
Mr. Gill, I
Interesting.
couldn't remember things and you should change.
I was told something.
Come here. I need to. That's the motion.
Holy cow. Come here. Come here. Oh, I would love to.
If this subtracted and this is negative.
Exactly. That's exactly what you have to remember. I think you have to do it again on this one. Change that first.
Alligator arm, right?
There's a folder.
Yeah, I mean,
But I didn't.
well, no, that's not less than. Because you need to change that to if that's a negative, right?
So I need it.
You need to change. So in this problem, and I did this on purpose, in this problem, you've got to use that subtracting a negative and change it to addition. You've got to do that a couple of times. I would do it first as a totally separate step. I wouldn't try to combine it with any, like also multiplying at the same time or any of that. You're going to probably mess up. Yes, it would become, that's why I would say do the change to addition. Let me stop the recording real quick. Yeah, and then after you do this, there are problems to practice. So don't think that that's it. I mean, that is it, but if you only do one problem, you're probably not going to have it mastered.
Same question. If I got this and I times it by 3, but I got 2 and 1, 2.
Oh, okay, I'll show what that is probably for.
And so I don't know, so I got 2 and 1.
Let me show you one thing real quick that's gonna come in handy again. Might help save your butt on the EOC next year, or really any multiple choice test. On the calculators, when you use the fraction button,